In the past several years, there have been several significant reports released on the state of education in this country. These reports, like A Nation at Risk, pointed to a crisis in education needing urgent attention and the talents and dedication of countless men and women. Thankfully, each year we see more and more persons working to resolve the issues and to move education forward in new and positive ways. Those involved in these efforts have a wonderful role model available to them, someone who has had enormous impact on the course of teacher education in this country and on the progress in reversing the crisis in our urban schools. That person is Dr. Martin Haberman, whom we have just honored for his many contributions, and who I now welcome to this podium to deliver our commencement address. Dr. Haberman.
Thank you so very much. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today and a great honor to have received this from Rhode Island College. Governor DePrete, Mayor Mancini, Congressman Makeley, Congresswoman Snyder, Mr. Carlotti, governors of the college, President Guardo, parents, friends, graduates, faculty, and my fellow honorees, Drs. Mankiller and Cumming, thank you. I stand here today as the last impediment between you and the degrees you have worked so hard and so long to have earned. I'm freed up by the fact that nobody ever remembers what's said to them in a graduation address. I'm also freed up by the fact that while Rhode Island College has, I am certain, elaborate and careful procedures for awarding honorary degrees, there are no procedures by which they can rescind them. And so I feel free to tell you what I really think. And the title of my brief remarks are, It's All So Confusing. Living is difficult. Living in a free country may be impossible. It's also confusing, especially to thoughtful, caring people. It seems as if the more we learn and the more we think about things, the more disturbing, even painful they become. After leaving office in 1952, a great but burned out President Truman said, quote, "Our enemies are now our friends are now our enemies, memories are short. I sometimes wonder if it's all been worthwhile." Education only confuses the situation and makes it worse. The more we learn about nuclear waste, air safety, disarmament, world affairs, crime, drugs, health care, race relations, housing, or the budget crisis, the more complicated and the less clear the problems become. And worst of all, most of us feel like innocent bystanders. I can't recall a time during the last 4 decades when there's been so much talk about individuals' capacities and potentialities and so little confidence on the part of the individual about his or her power to do anything about it. The ancient Greeks had a generic solution. They had something called a deus ex machina, a machine of God. And after 5 hours of listening to tragedy, a play dealing with endless, complex, and solvable problems, the machine of God was lowered from an overhang on the stage, and out stepped Zeus, who simply performed a series of miracles. The virtuous were rewarded, the guilty were punished, the blind could see, the lame could walk. The problem with a democratic society is we have no deus ex machina. The only solutions, the only miracles are going to come from us, each one of us, all of us. This led me to think who our heroes and saviors are. Recently in Wisconsin, in the Milwaukee area, during the last political campaign, we played host to Colonel North, who many regard as a great American hero, and we paid Colonel North $25,000 to speak. And following the speech, people paid $1,000 to have their picture taken with him. I jotted down next to that the average salary of the teachers in this country is $27,000 a year. So I asked a group of 25 teachers with whom I work, who would you like to have your pictures taken with? And unfortunately, they came up with names of people in show business and in sports. You often hear the notion that our children and youth need models, and I wondered if our teachers might not need some models as well, particularly models of genuinely heroic Americans. So I asked myself the same question, and unfortunately I came up with a very, very long list. Let me just share two names with you today. On December 2nd, 1955, a tired assistant seamstress, it was during Christmas season, had been working all day sewing. And it was 5:30 or 6 o'clock at night. And as she went home and got on the bus in Montgomery, Alabama, there was only one seat. And as she explains it, she didn't think too much, and she didn't have great goals in mind. Her feet hurt her, and she sat down in that seat. And we know that the world changed. And so here we have two people who broke the law. One is now rich and famous. The other now lives modestly in Detroit and will be happy to have her picture taken with you for nothing. 100 years from now, when our children read the history of the United States, ask yourself which person's name will be in their history books. My second hero is Jamie Escalante, but Jamie Escalante represents tens of thousands of teachers, not just himself. Jamie is the math teacher in Garfield High School in the barrio of Los Angeles, who yearly with his colleagues prepares 100 youngsters to pass the college calculus exam. And he never really had the benefit of many education courses or the burden of them. And the summary of what Escalante does was told to us a long time ago by Jefferson, who said, I believe in luck. The harder I work, the luckier I get. And what Escalante does is work nights and weekends. But if you were to analyze what his great teaching method is after he puts the calculus problems on the board, is he knows what every great teacher knows. It's not the material and me against you, it's me and you against the material. And the movies and the tapes and the representations of what Escalante does literally and figuratively show him standing behind some kid who had to risk his life to get to school because the gangs don't want him going to school, saying, "You can do it, Johnny. I know you can do it, Johnny. I believe you can do it, Johnny. I'll help you, Johnny." Each time a man or a person stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, he or she sends forth a ripple of hope. In the words of Robert Kennedy, this ripple of hope crosses each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, and these ripples build into a current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. But I'd like to tell you something that's tougher than learning calculus or teaching calculus, a lot tougher. And that's being a thoughtful, active American. As people come to our universities and colleges to learn to think and to reason through these problems, they pass through stages, and I'm sure you can quickly reflect back on what you were like 4 years or 6 years or 8 years ago, or however long ago you first started. In the first stage, our students are absolutists. They look for one right answer to problems. After they live in that stage a while and discover things don't work that way, they go to the other extreme and become relativists. They think that since there are conflicting or various opinions, that any one opinion is as good as any other. And then finally, hopefully by the time they graduate and for the subsequent remainder of their lives, they're analytical, reflective thinkers who know what he or she really believes and why. And they recognize opposing views, know the basis for the views, and most of all, will remain open to the possibility that there will always be more evidence in future to substantiate or cause changes. The absolutist is a person who only learns from what they see, feel, touch, smell. If you say people who drink die in traffic, they say, I know somebody who drinks and he doesn't. The relativist, who thinks anything goes, can only appeal to authority, and rather than evaluating the ideas, looks only to who said it, not what was said. Finally, the analytical, thoughtful mind is open to experience, theory, research, logical argument, expert opinion, and God help us, even common sense. In all your lives, there will be nothing tougher than living up to our stated values as Americans. And I'd like to comment on just 4 of these tough standards you're going to have to meet. The first is you're going to have to believe in the people of the United States. A lot of people claim to love our country, but they seem to hate the people who live in it. Schools have always inculcated patriotism, but the terms of allegiance are often narrowly conceived. The fact that loyalty to our nation requires loyalty to all the subgroups within the nation is seldom pointed out. The second thing you're going to have to believe is that education is a common good. It's not a personal thing that you purchase to get a better job and now the hell with everybody else. How many people does it take to terrorize a plane or close a school or cause a riot? Much less than a fraction of 1%. That would be an overestimate. In a free society, education cannot be a scarce commodity to be purchased in exchange for a good job. We're all on the same train, whether you've got a private car or in first class, or whether you're in steerage, we're on the same train. In 1950, there were 17 workers for each person on Social Security. When you retire, many of you, in 2020, there'll be 2 workers for every person who retires. In the year 2000, 15% of people who take their first job will be white males. That's only 11 years from now. 15% of those who begin will be white males. 85% of those who take their first job will be minorities and women. But education causes lots of new ideas, lots of change, and if more and more people get it, there's just more and more confusion. Because anyone who's begun to think places some portion of the world in jeopardy. It's tough to think about this, but we're going to have to. John Kennedy said, "What we need now in this nation is a constant flow of new ideas. We can't obtain new ideas until we have a government and a public opinion which respects new ideas and the people who have them. Our country has surmounted great crises, not because of our wealth, not because of our rhetoric, not because we had longer cars and wider refrigerators and bigger television screens than anyone else, but because our ideas were more compelling and more penetrating and more wise and more enduring." The third standard we're going to have to meet as Americans is a tolerance for ambiguity. To survive and thrive in our beautifully diverse culture, the problems will get more complex, not less, more expensive, not cheaper, require more imagination, not less. If we temporarily fail at a solution, let's at least do it in an exciting and new way and not replicate the same old errors of the past. More than we need any one group telling other groups what they should believe, we need a celebration of all groups working out their own alternatives without intruding on the rights and choices of others. Finally, and this is much tougher than calculus, you're going to have to meet a fourth standard. You're going to have to believe in yourself. Those of you who teach, and we really can't be sure, those of you not entering the teaching profession now may in future, those of you entering it now may not in future be in it. You're going to have to believe in yourself because it takes somebody to make somebody. Nobodies don't make somebodies. You're going to have to solve the problems that I've raised and others by experience and not necessarily by training or more education. Experience is a very tough teacher because the tests come first and the learning comes afterward. The first and greatest commandment is don't let them scare you. Remember, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. I now realize that I asked the wrong question. It's not who we would like to have our pictures taken with, but how we can live our lives so that someone would want to take their picture with us, the way they'll want to do after you cross this stage today. Far and away, the best prize that life offers us is the chance to work hard at something that's worth doing. You can make a difference, each one of you. I can promise you here today that in each one of your lives, you will have at least one opportunity to sit down on the front of somebody's bus. And when that day, when that opportunity presents itself, and it will, you won't be confused because of the education you've received. And you'll know what's right because of the education you'll receive. And most of all, you'll know why it's right because of the education you've received. I know you can do it, Johnny. I know you can do it. I'll help you. Thank you very much.
I know we all thank Dr. Haberman for his wisdom and insight and the not-so-subtle challenge to take on that confusion. Thank you very much.